All right, so having a new construction home built for you can be really exciting. And the very last thing you want to happen, though, is to have surprises later on down the road once the home is finished, especially when it comes to the payment on your mortgage. My name's Jared Evanson. I got about 1,500 new construction transactions under my belt through teams that I've managed, personal transactions that I've done, and also houses that I've had built for myself. So let's get into what I'm talking about here. And what I'm specifically wanting to talk about today is property taxes. So, most people who get a mortgage, especially in new construction, are having their property taxes escrowed in the payment. So, what that means is your payment is going to consist of a few things. It's going to consist of the mortgage for the loan that you're getting, it's going to consist of your homeowner's insurance, and it's going to consist of the property taxes. We typically, for property taxes and your homeowner's insurance, we're going to take the amount due for the year, we're going to divide it by 12, and we're going to put that into your payment, 12 monthly payments to get your full mortgage payment amount. Now, when you are having a home built, it's really important to know how property taxes work on that. So when you just have a plain piece of dirt with no house on it, the property taxes on that structure are going to be pretty low. It might be $500 for the year, it might be $400 for the year. Who knows what that amount might be, but it's going to be much less than what it's going to be once that house is done. You've got four walls, you've moved in, and you're happy. Now, that being said, typically the property tax assessor for your county isn't showing up as soon as that house is done and doing a new property tax assessment for your house. So when you first get into that house, it can take upwards of over a year before the tax man finally comes around and says, "Oh, there's a house here. We got to start charging these people more property taxes." So it can affect your mortgage and it can cause surprises down the road. Let's talk about what that looks like. So when you're buying a house and you're getting the loan, now one thing that we're doing typically when you're getting a house is we're estimating your property taxes. Usually when you're buying a house that's already existing, the property taxes have been assessed. We can look on the county assessor's website and see how much you need to pay for property taxes on that house, so we can get you an exact figure to put down for your mortgage payment. Now, on a new construction house, that's not the case, because all we have is dirt to go off of. We have the dirt assessed value, basically, right? So you're putting let's say it's a $650,000 house that you're building on top of that dirt, or your purchase price is going to be $650,000. Let's call it that. As a lender, we have to come up with a number to use for your property taxes, because we got to make sure that you can afford the payment when the house is done. So what we're doing is we're typically using a percentage of the purchase price. So a common number that's used by a lot of lenders is 1.25% of your purchase price. So if you're building a $650,000 house, and you're using 1.25% of the purchase price to come up with the property tax amount, that's $8,125 a year. So we'll divide that by 12 and we'll make your payment $677 a month for your property tax portion of your payment. Now, that's not the number that you're typically going to have once your property taxes become due. It's probably actually a little bit higher. And that's not the number that every lender uses on every loan. So they can use a number of methods as long as it's realistic and makes sense for that area and they're consistent. So some lenders might only use 1%. Some lenders might actually go to the county and find out what the mill rate is for that house. A mill rate is basically what they're actually basing the property taxes in that community off of. Oftentimes, like where I live, the mill rate is somewhere around 1.1%. So if someone's building a $1 million house, for example, we're going to use 1.1% of that, so $11,000 a year for the property taxes. Now, this isn't an exact science at the end of the day. So when the tax man comes around, it can be upwards of a year before they actually come and look at your house and add those assessed property taxes. They might not give you a tax assessed value for what you paid. It's common for that to be a little bit lower, and that's okay, you guys. Your property tax assessed value isn't always going to match your like what your house would sell for. Sometimes it's going to be lower, and that's fine. That just means you're paying a little less property taxes up until you go sell your house. So you really don't want your tax assessed value to be too much higher, because when a real estate agent is assessing your house for a sale, they're not looking at tax assessed value. That's sometimes used. Lenders might use that for home equity loans or something like that, but it's not something to really base your value off of. So let's get into this a little bit more though. So why does this become confusing, and especially at the end of the transaction? So like I mentioned, we are going to qualify you through the underwriting process with that estimated property tax amount based off of your purchase price. So in that $650,000 example, a lot of lenders are probably going to use $677 a month for that estimated property tax amount. Now, your lender's going to be talking to you about what your mortgage payment is going to be. They're going to be telling you that number. They're going to be telling you, they should be telling you that that's an estimated number, and your actual property tax amount is going to be different. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is where loan officers, real estate agents need to make sure they are educating you as a buyer, or you, if you are a professional, you are educating your client on what happens at the end. And you really, if you're a lender, you really need to know what your company's policy and process is at the end of the transaction. So typically that number is going to stay in the file all the way up until the underwriter does their clear to close. And this is where it varies on what people do. Most lenders that I come across, at that point, the file is going to go to another person in their department who is drawing up the final loan closing documents. What I see happen a lot is that person is going to change the file again. They're going to slash that property tax amount to what is currently showing due for that year for the property taxes for the amount owed. So we've been estimating, $8,000 a year, but right now that property might only show $500 a year. So that closer is going to adjust your entire loan file. They're going to change that amount to, call it $50 a month, and that's going to be the payment for the client moving forward. That's going to be what's on the loan documents that they sign. It's over $600 cheaper than what their payment is going to be once those property taxes are assessed. And this is where best practices need to come into play. One, if you're a client and you are expecting a certain payment up until the end of the loan, and you're signing your final loan documents and it says that payment's way lower, it's not time to jump for joy, because you're going to owe that money eventually. Now taxes you don't have to pay it in arrears, but this is what happens is now you're making a payment that is substantially less than what you need to be expecting to pay. And it's because of the property taxes, right? We're collecting less than what really is owed. So a year may go by, might be 6 months, and the tax man's going to come around. He's going to reassess that property, and he's going to say, okay, from this date moving forward, here is your property tax amount. We've assessed the home. This is our estimated value. We based the taxes off of that. Now your payment's going to go up $500-$600. Now, two things happen here. One, the lender is going to get the invoice showing that the property taxes have gone up. And so now they need to adjust your mortgage payment to reflect the new property taxes. So you're going to get a notice in the mail saying, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, your mortgage payment is now going to be X because your escrows are short. We're only collecting $50 a month. We need to be collecting $677 a month. So here's what your payment is moving forward. The other thing that's going to happen here is now, though, they're going to have an escrow shortage. So we're getting a bill for the property taxes, and it's $4,000 for the first half of the year. Well, hold on, there's not that much in your escrow account because you've only been paying $50 a month. So now they got to make up that shortage. So you need to be ready to take that amount due to fill your escrow account up so your property taxes can be paid. Otherwise, they're going to raise your payment even more to catch up. So here's the best practice. If your lender is reducing your property taxes at closing, which most of them do, and I'll explain why they do that here in a minute as well. What you should be doing is every single month you should be still paying that estimated property tax amount. You can do what's called a additional escrow payment. every month. So when you set your payment, do your minimum monthly payment, and then you say, I want to put whatever it is, $500 additional escrow up until my escrow accounts are up to where they need to be. Or you need to be taking that money and setting it aside in a savings account of your own. So that way, when that bill comes due, you've got the money to do an additional escrow payment to get your escrows caught up so that they can pay your property taxes. Now, this isn't fun for anybody, and it's not how it's handled in every situation, but it's how I see it handled most of the time. The client can oftentimes be told this, and a year will go by and they'll forget about it, and it's a surprise. You just get accustomed to making the payment you're paying, you forget about it, and then all of a sudden it's like, how did this happen? I didn't know, and they might forget the conversation, or the lender never had it with them, or the realtor, or whoever. Now, at that point, it's like, it sucks. There's nothing you can do besides pay the money. So you gotta be prepared to pay it. Some lenders will just continue to collect the amount that we underwrote your file with, that $677 a month, in this scenario at least. And what could happen though is if a year goes by and we get a new property tax bill for you and the tax man hasn't come around and assessed those property taxes yet, now we've got an escrow overage. So maybe you're paying those reduced taxes for a little while longer. You're going to get a refund check in the mail for your escrows. And what I suggest you do with that money is you stash it away so that when the tax assessed value does go up, that money's there to pay those property taxes. So why do lenders do it differently? It comes down to an interpretation of how lenders are able to actually collect and how much money they're allowed to keep in your escrow reserves account. So there are laws that prevent lenders from just making that escrow payment whatever they want, so that way there's more in there. They're only allowed to have, I think it's up to like 3 months reserves and property taxes above what is due in the next following month. And I think like 2 for your homeowner's insurance. And so that's why they change it right then, is because we're not allowed to collect an excessive amount. And others say, well, this is what we think the taxes, so we can collect this up until next year when we may or may not get a bill. And then we can just do an escrow analysis and offer a refund then. So here is the most important thing though, is to just know, educate, and remind yourselves what happens with property taxes when you're having a home built. I have had many times in my career where a year has gone by, a client calls and says, oh, got that bill. I didn't prepare for it. I knew it was coming, but I didn't prepare for it. Or I don't remember this conversation. And I'm like, well, actually, here's, we actually would have someone sign something acknowledging that they knew this was going to happen. But they still forget. Or there are the cases where they just aren't told. I can tell you, I can go back to the very first new construction transaction I did as a lender. I actually didn't know this. They don't teach you that. It's not part of the process. I faked it till I made it and got to the end and was like, oh, wait a minute. How come now all of a sudden we're collecting way less money for property taxes? And I had to have it explained to me so I could then explain to the client. Now, when, like here across country, we don't reduce the payment at the end unless the client requests us to only collect what is currently due. We have them sign a hold harmless agreement. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. Personally, I would want to pay the higher amount just so I get accustomed to that. I don't want any surprises. I don't want to have to scrape up, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 on a whim. I don't want to forget about it. So new construction, if you have any questions about how property taxes work here, let me know. I'd love to have the conversation with you. Real estate agents, have this conversation with your buyers. If you're selling new construction, have the conversation with their lender. Everybody just make sure that the info is out there. I hope this helped. If you guys like this, be sure to subscribe, follow my stuff. I'm going to be putting out all kinds of content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.